We can move the chairs if you want.
I don't know how I'm going to do this one. Let me just move back a little. Because I'm going to be getting support from Cleveland State, from like actual audio engineers on.
Should we move the chairs closer together?
So if you're joining us live, hi. I'm Patti Napolitano, owner and operator of Wellness Cleveland, adjunct faculty with Cleveland State University, and I'm joined here by my esteemed friend and fellow community member, fellow citizen, Reverend Doug Horner.
Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, thank you so much. We just got wonderful news.
Yes.
I mean, just amazing news that Israel and Hamas have agreed to a ceasefire.
Kind of lifts part of a dark cloud, doesn't it?
Oh,
It's been hanging over us for over a year.
yeah. Well, it's hanging over us for a year, but hanging like for
Oh,
decades, just decades
Since
of.
the Nakba.
Since the Nakba.
We're not here to talk about that, so
We're
I'll let
not
you
here to
define that
talk
if you
about
want to go
that.
ahead and
Well,
search that on the
You
internet.
know, I really love entertaining the CIA operatives who've been watching me.
Might as well. I know all this about you anyway.
Yeah. So I am interested in today talking about who is my neighbor, nuts and bolts of engaging communities, which is, I think, just a moving, it's like the line on the football field that keeps moving with every play.
Yeah,
To
yeah.
me.
3 steps forward, 2 steps back, or vice versa sometimes.
Yeah.
Then you got to punt. Well, where should I start? Should I start like present? Should I start 40 years ago? Should I start with a vision for my future? What would you like to hear first?
I would say I'm going to introduce you to most of my students. So my students are usually between the ages of 22 and 80.
Oh,
I've had 2 80-year-old students in this course who graduate
Nice.
with a master's degree. One of them asked me to write a recommendation letter after
nice.
for another master's. And I said, if you go to school one more time, I will never forgive you.
Wow.
Start your work. You're ready.
Wow.
You're ready.
Yeah.
But many of them, I would say 75% of our students have a bachelor's degree in something else.
Right.
Many of them are adult learners who have a career and are
Right.
shifting into social work.
Right.
And so they want that MSW
Good.
because they want
Good.
independent licensure and to be insured to start their own thing.
Good background.
And that's a lot of advanced generalist students.
Yeah.
And so they often have a passion and they are ready to be drawn back by a bow and let forth. So maybe
Yeah.
start 40 years ago.
Right. So 40 years ago, I was in my 20s, and I had grown up in a family that went to church all the time. So I saw kind of the Jesus movement. I saw religion happening, which it can be separate from the Jesus movement.
Yeah.
Because, you know, the God, love, peace thing sometimes moves on its own at a different pace than the church. And so
I want to do this.
yes. So you pick up the Jesus movement stuff kind of in your gut and in your heart. You know, it doesn't really mess with your head very much, except for it creates like a cognitive dissonance. Like, why is a religion kind of so stale, and why are the sermons so boring? And yet there's so many people here that love each other, and you know that they love each other, and they love their neighbors because they're putting on community meals and they're singing in the choir. During the Christmas time, 4 choirs from the neighborhood all get together in one church, and they switch churches every year and sing like the Messiah, you know.
Yeah.
And it's just such a amazing gift to everybody. Churches, you know, on the side. And I saw that in action, and then I got into the Marine Corps, where they teach you how to organize their way.
Yeah.
The Uniform Code of Military Justice.
Uh-huh.
And they teach you how to be a leader there. And so for 4 years, I learned how to do that. And I realized that's not the skill set that I'm going to need to get me through my life.
Yeah.
That's important if you're going to be in the military.
Yeah.
So I don't want to poo-poo that.
Last order first, first order last is
Yes.
really important when there's cannon fire coming in.
And so you don't want to get anybody else hurt or killed.
You want to be accountable. High accountability in military learning.
Because it's life on the line.
Yeah.
You get trained for getting shot at. But I got out and I had to unlearn a whole bunch of that stuff. Because it's the hierarchical, top-down, I'm the boss, the drill instructor is God kind of thing.
Well, because there's not a shared mission in that. Military Marine is very shared mission. There's no question what the mission is.
Right.
What you're talking about, and very in line with what I've experienced in the highs and lows of my religious participation through my life in many communities. The highs are, we all take turns hosting the Thanksgiving service the eve before, and we go to different congregations, right? And Thanksgiving is our community, right? And the lows are, there's somebody who has an idea of what we're doing, and it doesn't matter if you understand it. I understand it, having looked inside the hat and read the golden tablets, you know? And religion can lend certainty to people with that top-down management style.
And they need that. And a lot of people think they need that, and they think they're going to go to church and get that and feel better. And sometimes, you know, Jesus sneaks in on the side.
Sometimes. I think there was a whole thing about that, of him like preaching on the Sabbath, right?
That's right. That's right. And so unlearning that kind of hierarchical stuff and then learning a whole other way, like how Jesus did it, like going to the Beatitudes, right? And going to the Gospels, and every single story or parable that Jesus tells. And I'm talking about the red letters now.
Yeah.
When you read those, you realize that this is a model for how we could live life. They're not just telling you what to do. Actually, it's like, these are the outcomes you can expect if you get into the movement.
Oh, this is like the promises of AA.
Yeah.
People don't get into AA for the ball and chain of sobriety. They get into it to the promises, which they don't even know. Most people stumbling into an AA meeting are not like, I'm looking for a new freedom and a new happiness, right? They're like, I'm going to die if I don't do something different. And they're not even aware of the gifts coming towards them.
And all of a sudden, somebody tells them, because they're now following directions in AA, they're following directions. Somebody says, oh, you're probably ready for the fourth step. Why don't you try that? And they're like, oh yeah, I want to do the fourth step. And all of a sudden, it opens up a new world. Because why? Because they dig into themselves.
And they dig into accountability.
And all of a sudden they want to be held accountable. Somebody tell me how to get out of this dark place that I'm thinking about right now. How do I do that? How come you're so happy all the time? Oh, not because somebody told you what to do. It's because you what do you call it? You act your way into thinking right?
Yeah.
Act your way into thinking right?
I did not really understand 12-step models until I was in my 30s. So I had already been in my field almost 15 years. And I had coworkers who were working the program, and, you know, it's all around the coffee pot. You walk in, you clock in, you're getting coffee, you're making coffee. And one of my coworkers came to me and he goes, you know, we talked yesterday and I felt weird about it. I wanted to apologize. I was in my head about something else, and I just felt like I was more stressed during our conversation. And I was like, I was not even upset about what happened. It's not like we had this huge thing. And I just went, that's so beautiful and mature. And thank you for like prioritizing this working relationship and what I might be feeling. And they were like, yeah, I ended up talking to my sponsor about it. And that's my sign. If I'm still thinking about it later, I really have to think about where I should apologize. And I was like, oh, I didn't even know that was a thing. You know, like my experience of AA as a social worker was that people would try to come in late from curfew and tell me they were at an AA meeting. And that was it, you know, and like, many times they were not sober.
Gotcha.
So AA is, to me, I'm a big fan because it's the foundation for cognitive behavioral therapy.
There you go.
There's nothing that you can do that is
self-actualized.
Self-actualized. Yeah, there's nothing that is like a really formal form of therapy or treatment or modality that is not just like someone got their PhD in observing how people are successful in reaching out to the brokenhearted, to me.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So isn't there a pyramid that goes from getting your first needs met, and then at the peak of that is self-actualization when you get up to the top.
Yeah. So
Like
Maslow,
that's kind of where we're all going, isn't it?
you're gonna love it, because Abraham Maslow, who came up with that, recently is under a little bit more criticism. I'm sure that he's long dead, if not an old man. But he took that off of a tribe, like a non-industrialized tribe, and he said, show me your wealthiest citizens.
Right.
And they brought him to people who had nothing.
Right.
And he said, why do you have people with the least who are your wealthiest? And they said, we don't need anything.
Right.
We're here, like it's the shamans,
Yes.
you know, who say, I don't really need anything. My joy is to be here for others and to comfort and heal and to be that wounded healer who is healed. And so that whole hierarchy of need describes a society where citizens thrive, where everyone's basic needs are met, all of these things. And so we kind of take that and project it onto our own lives, and we say, well, you, Doug, you are not self-actualized. So we need to get you your basic needs met. And why aren't you meeting your basic needs? You know, so when we're talking about the kingdom of heaven is at hand, how do you set a strategy for intervening on a community level where you are not saying, I'm the one who is the healer here.
Right.
I am the one who is the actor in acting.
So you find the people who are the shamans, the self-actualized ones, and many times they're the elders, but not all the time. Because there are times when a teenager is self-actualized.
Yeah.
And in my mind right now, I know of a queer teenager who blew the socks off of people in the pews when they were called to witness about their experience in high school and what they learned from going from being bullied to becoming kind of who they really were in their own bodies, feeling and I'm talking about their soul, to their feet, to how they do their hair, like the whole thing. And everybody had a box of tissues next to them. You know, it's like, wow, really, that can happen for a 17-year-old? It's like, sometimes the young people will lead us, right? And Jesus said it. Jesus said, let these kids come to me because theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And he was saying something because they're observing everything.
Yeah.
Like they're mirroring what our whole community is doing. So my first point is you got to find the self-actualized people. They may not be the trustees or the people who got the alphabet soup behind their names or the people with a reverend or a pastor in front of their name. They may not.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times people are custodians or caretakers of the religion, and they're not necessarily working on the Jesus movement part.
Yeah.
It's rare actually to find a person in charge of a religious institution that actually can shape the movement of the Jesus movement.
Yeah. I met with Michael Caso, who did court psychiatric clinic evaluations. He was in charge of the court psych clinic for 27 years. And we were talking about sex offenses and assessing and tattling and like, what is the role of social work? We're writing these social histories to ameliorate the position and ameliorate the humanity for these judges and help them make good decisions and link them to treatment.
Right.
And one of the things, and also it's one of the most taboo groups that it's so hard for us to engender some empathy for or compassion for.
Just put them away somewhere. Nobody wants to see them.
Yeah, and in my social work master's program, I picked sex offender housing as a policy and a grant. Like, I'm going to write this pretend grant. And my classmates were like, the feedback I got was, when I saw your presentation, I didn't even want to watch it. And I'm so glad I did. I had no idea how, like, this bottom line that we are paying for monitoring people, and we could take a third of that and effectively house people get them treatment. And so we're treating our communities, because what I really want is for my daughters to ride the rapid and feel like there are healed and healthy people around them. Because what I learned assessing people on probation over the course of 4 years, doing violent risk assessments, is that it's really terrifying how many people have pled guilty to or been found guilty of a sex offense who are assigned 2 or 5 years of community probation. Like, you're saying you're guilty and you're just like out in there, and there's not great housing or treatment options, you know. So how do we, and so Mike was saying, we really have to, I had to change my idea of who the client was and not think this patient is my client, but I have to think in my role, the community is my client.
Yeah.
And what is going to be best for the community in this setting, and how do I address the basic needs of everyone in my community in light of this social history? What do I really want to express in a gender? So, not necessarily sex offenders specifically, but personalities that we don't want at the table. Personalities where you have a healer, you've got a shaman, you've got community actors, you've got people who are interested, who have that spark, and there's going to be conflict.
Absolutely.
So how do you manage that space?
So at St. Paul's, where I was, the leaders are people that I spent a lot of time with coaching. But you don't coach from the get-go. You spend time listening, like months and months listening. Here's a person who really understands their life and the life of their circles, like the concentric circles. Now we're asking them, and once one of their circles, I take on the role of shepherd by being the one that's kind of like saying, okay, how do we get this whole crowd now, this whole herd of sheep moving in the direction we want? Well, I can't expect that person who's new at it to stand up there being able to watch every single person. I mean, that's why shepherds have shepherd dogs, right? Choo, 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 choo. So I become the shepherd dog.
You're running around the outside.
So I'm taking care of the folks who've got this personality quirk from whatever and whatever they're bringing at the time, and they want to talk back during the sermon, but it's like, okay, I really want to hear you. So can we go to the classroom and let's talk about that? And then I know I make remarks or want to have their own conversation and be heard. And it could be a really big disruption, but somebody's got to come over. And sometimes all it takes is just sit down and say, hey, I'm really listening to you. Or, hey, I want to listen to you.
So you're attending to the agenda. You're attending to the stated shared purpose.
Yes.
You're acknowledging the disruption.
Yes.
And you're not letting the disruption become the meeting.
Right. And it is
nuanced.
It is nuanced, and it's not something you do by yourself.
Yeah.
This is so in my training as a pastor, I was told never to just move forward on a project or a program by myself. Like if I didn't have 2 or 3 people with me, then this program's not going anywhere yet. It's just in the germination stage. It hasn't started to pop up yet. So unless you got 2 or 3 with you, it's not going anywhere. You don't have legs yet. So that's why you think about all the various nuances, like you said, and then who's going to fill them, and then you have your first meeting.
Yeah, this is for my process. I view this as the spaghetti on the wall, and it's something that's very scary for me to tell people. I'm going to do this and this and this, and like be vulnerable and share the many threads, because I don't need them to work out anymore. Where earlier, if I would have been like, oh, I'm going to write this textbook, like I would be so embarrassed if it didn't come to fruition.
Oh, yeah.
Where actually, of course, we kind of talked about, I hated the textbook so much, and I was looking for a textbook, and finally I said, I don't want one. And then I went, maybe that'll be a PhD project someday. Like, if it's going to be something I'm going to do on my own, I need 6 years to do nothing else on it. So I have like an outline, and that was my spaghetti on the wall. So I have like just spreadsheets and spreadsheets of projects I'd like to do, where I think I'm just going to let it hang out there and see who else wants to work on it. And lo and behold, there was this, grant that got, the finances are not enough to pay for my time, but the leverage gets me support from CSU, IT staff and recording staff and hosts. They're going to help me format all the things, so now it's no longer my hope or my dream.
It can become reality.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, over my career, there's probably 75% of the dreams or I had or somebody else had that never really came to fruition.
Yeah.
But one of them that did was this community garden that I helped start.
Which one?
Right across the street from St. Paul's, the St. Paul's Patch,
Yeah.
which is right next to what used to be an abandoned apartment house.
Mhm.
And the city had wanted to take this plot of land as a parking lot for the apartment house that they were going to spend $500,000 renovating.
Yeah.
And I got the councilman and some of the neighbors on board. In these times, there's a lot of neighbors land.
Yeah.
Can we use that as a garden? And so I got about 7 people to come with me to a meeting with Joe Simperman.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, okay. So he actually took it down and walked the plans through the planning commission, through the various places that need to rubber stamp it, and got that zoned as a green space in the city. And the only way they can use that as a parking lot now is if they go back to zoning and say, hey, we want to change this. And then they go back to the community and say, can we change this into a parking lot? No, we want the community garden.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden it became a community engagement thing.
Dude, my brother calls that spreadsheets for the greater glory of
There you
God.
go.
He was doing like American Council on Bishops continuing education certification programming. And I was like, oh, this is terrible. Just evaluating whether they should count. And he was like, Patti, someone's got to count the beans.
That's true.
You know, like there's many zoning. Oh,
It's a big deal.
and Simperman.
was a
The
big deal.
Simpermans have zone rec, don't they?
I don't know about that. Zone rec is a warming spot for the homeless now.
Yeah.
So that was one big win when the new mayor came.
Yeah.
Well, one of the things that I said is I'm going to support you, but the first thing I need you to do is open up these rec centers that are closed during inclement weather.
Yes.
Open them up and let people come in out of the cold.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, they're sitting in tents across the street from zone rec.
Yeah.
Why are they out there freezing? It's 12 degrees outside, and you got this nice warm space.
The thing,
Come on.
the street outreach, just the community collaboration that's been present over the last, it has to be 40 years now, is unparalleled. I've done national homeless stuff. I've gone West Coast. I've gone New York City, and I'm like, don't you guys have this? Don't you guys have that? Like, no, we don't have people who have been living in single room housing advocating on behalf of people in every community.
I think a part of that came about is because Cleveland was a destination during the Industrial Revolution for people looking for a new life, for new jobs, for something else. And then Thomas Merton Society started.
Catholic workers, man.
And the Catholic workers
Yeah.
started. And that took root.
Yeah.
And especially on the west side of Cleveland, all of a sudden people realized that my neighbors are doing okay. They may not have any money, but they're doing okay. Like, wow, all of a sudden we're realizing that all of us are thrown together. It's like the salad, right? The tossed salad of socioeconomic life on the west side, because you had the managers, you had the upper management, you had millionaires, and then you had people basically living in shacks or tents.
Yeah.
This is for the last 100 years, and they're all in the neighborhood.
And they're invisible.
And so like the homeless guy who you're
Yeah.
complaining about sleeping in the bushes down the street, he's actually lived in that neighbor 40 years longer than you have.
I worked on a project that targeted the 10% longest homeless stayers, and I had been a social worker 15 years focusing on homeless families, severe persistent mental illness. I did secondary case management. I would grocery shop with people, and that was the intervention. It was like getting food, took 3 hours, you know. And I go in thinking I'm going to see a lot of African American people in their 50s who are on crack. And what did I see? This is when I really started seeing you a lot more at St. Paul's. Veterans who had been sleeping outside for 25 years, who I had never seen in my whole career. And I started having lunch at the Westside Catholic Center, and I started having coffee at St. Paul's, and like my eyes were just open to a whole new part of society that we had just said, no, like that doesn't exist. That was not, we had to argue for people to be allowed into permanent supportive housing. They weren't considered chronically homeless.
Right. Because they weren't documented.
They weren't documented.
Because they didn't want to be documented, because they had already been documented and they hated that label.
Yeah.
It goes back to that labels thing again.
Yeah.
Who wants to walk around with a label above your head that says homeless or mentally ill? Who wants to be called that? Nobody.
I went to Portland to visit family in 2022, and I was really amazed at just the way the city looks, like 3 deep tents on the sidewalks. It's really different out there.
So I think the solutions are going to be different everywhere, but the same. Because it takes time, and it takes people that want to go and spend time to gain trust individually. So when you're community organizing, the thing that Jim Schlecht or pastors or priests have is the calling to be with people on their journey without judging them for being homeless or addicts or alcoholics or whatever. You just, hey, how you doing? Let's go for a walk. Hey, let's have a cup of coffee. Hey, let's go get Burger King. And then they say, hey, so how come you spend so much time with me? I said, well, I've got ideas, but it seems like you're doing okay. So I'm just learning about you.
Yeah.
And you know, just treating people like they're humans. You want to be treated. I mean, isn't that like a rule in every religion in the world?
Right.
Treat people like you want to be treated. I mean, that's kind of like the bare bones minimum, but it actually is community organizing 101.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have the time, you're not going to organize anything.
It absolves me from having to give people solutions when I say, look, even when people ask me for advice and they're like, no, but you're the social worker, or you're the expert, or you know how to do this. You've seen so many people. And I say, well, I've never met you. And you survived 100% of the days that you survived getting up to here. And you probably lived through things that even if you explain them to me, I could never fully appreciate what it was like, right? So what advice do you have for me? I really don't know.
That's beautiful. I had to learn that lesson the hard way from my daughter, who at the time was 14. And we were in the car coming home from some school event, and she was all excited. And she wanted to tell me about something, her experience that was happening. And I immediately jumped into problem-solving solution. Why? Because I wanted to solve her problem? No. Because I wanted to talk about something else. So let's solve this problem quickly so I can get on to what I wanted to talk about.
Yeah.
So a lot of times, and I don't want to cast any aspersions, a lot of times we end up trying to solve somebody else's stuff because we want to move the conversation on. We want to finish this up, tie it up in a bow, say, here, finished package. Thank you for helping me have a better day.
Yeah.
It's not about my day, honestly. And there's nobody else that can solve somebody's problem. Like and I don't even call them clients anymore, the guests.
Yeah.
They're the experts in their life. Most times, and this is 40 years experience talking, when they're telling you their story, the solution will become self-evident. And then the relationship helps them find the platform that they're going to start jumping off to the next level.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of times I'll tell people, you're going to know when it's time to act on this thing.
And you know what to do already.
Yeah.
And it may be just a gut feeling at the moment. And a lot of people ignore their gut. And trauma-informed care helps you with that. But also just people's gut. And you know who's better at that? Women are better at that than men. Is really listening to their gut. Because a lot of stuff happens.
Because we socialize boys not to feel that. You better not feel anything. I'm sure that wasn't brought up in the Marine Corps at all. Cold? It's not cold. I'm going to take my shirt off. It's hot out here.
Yep. So a lot of the elders in the Jesus movement are women. And it got left out of the Bible. It was on purpose.
Oh.
It really was. And I've come to this conclusion. That is not an expert opinion, by the way. But
it's my opinion.
I'm
not an expert.
I've heard it from experts, though, on the side. Like
yeah.
I can't mention their names. But for the first couple centuries, men ran it because they didn't want the women to run it. If it would have been the same as it was during Jesus's time, women would have been running the church for the whole time.
And that was part of the revolution of Jesus, the person, was including Martha there at his feet.
And his mom.
Yeah. And his mom.
The Marianists know. I mean, why did God pick her? Because she was awesome. She's like the best out of the whole world. Picks Mary. Why? Because she was like at whatever age, 12, she was already the elder in her community.
Yeah, that's not what they teach at the Catholic Church. It was very, very directly taught to me in my pre-K through 12th grade education that God picked Mary because she said yes and she submitted.
That's because that's what those men want to do.
If it's so natural for women to submit, why do we have to tell them to do it all the time? Shouldn't they just want to?
And if they don't?
Yeah. So what is the role of gender in community work for you, in community building?
Women first.
Women first.
They know how to do it.
Mm.
They know how to get people out to make 250 pies.
Oh, I loved Malachi's backdoor ministry. Like that to me is just the center of motherhood and grandmotherhood and old biddies in the kitchen making just peanut butter and jelly after peanut butter and jelly and just handing them out a Dutch door.
The secret that the priests don't tell you, they're hanging around all the women and the nuns and all that, is they know how to get shit done. Don't go to the men in the congregation because they'll want to go fix something.
Yeah, I go out to dinner every Tuesday night with a priest, with a Monsignor who's retired, who tells me, like, you're the reason, people like you are the reason women can't be priests in the Catholic Church. We have a lovely, lovely friendship of adversarialness.
That's funny.
But yeah, I lost the thought, but we were talking about women and
women
getting
know how to get it done.
I said, do you know if there's ever been a Jesuit pope? And he said, I doubt it, which is kind of like how a lot of diocesan Catholics feel about Jesuits, that they're not real Catholics,
right?
Or like they'll accuse people of being Jesuit Catholic because they're too social justice oriented.
Yeah.
Francis. And not only, we looked it up at dinner, not only is Francis the first Jesuit pope, he just named the first female prefect of all time. She's an Italian too.
There you go.
Look at this guy.
Yeah.
Moving and shaking. I said, I am not surprised at all.
See, this is the Jesus movement actually working. And what did he have to do? He had to clear the threshing floor. Right? He had, so how long has Francis been there? It's been a while.
Yeah.
And all this time he has weathered the controversy. People wanted to kill him, literally put out a hit on the Pope. And he put the chaff over there, put the wheat over here, and what is it? Well, all of a sudden the wheat starts germinating, the wheat starts taking off, the movement starts going. I'm getting goosebumps thinking about this. The movement's going to continue. See, this is the thing. You can't kill that kind of movement. Yeah. Even though the Opus Dei, they want to stop. The conservatives want to stop Francis. They can't.
Well, the church has split many times. Not that any of them really want you to believe it. They all say they're the one.
Right.
Father Mark DiNardo, may he rest in heaven celebrating Eucharist forever. He was a great spiritual guide for me, and we talked about many of the struggles of just the real work, and he said, it really, in my heart, Eucharist is so important. Right. That celebration of being the body of Christ and just reaching out your hand. And I just can't wait to be in heaven and celebrate Eucharist eternally. But I know that God strongly desires for there to be one church and for there to be no divisions. And I can't imagine anything God would want more than for this to be heaven and for us to be one church. And if God has not seen fit, all powerful, omniscient, to make it happen, who am I? Right. Why? That's my ego. That's my hubris to say, I've got to get these things done.
Well, so there's a thing, there's some dreams we can't ever see. like Martin Luther King said, I'm never going to see the promised land, but he sure got us really pretty far. Got us to the top of the mountain, pretty close anyway. So there's some people that have that kind of prophetic vision, and some of us actually have that dream in the back of our head, and we might not see it like racial solidarity across the nation.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a great dream. We keep taking 4 steps forward and 3 steps back, or actually we're probably like 5 steps back right now at this very point, but the movement doesn't stop. Like this Jesus movement, it's not going to stop. And I guess the thing that I loved about Mark is, and we used to have lots of theological discussions, is Mark had his own mindset, and yet there was a huge piece of him, the Jesus piece of him, that was just open and loving and judgment free, and that's what attracted people to get up sometimes at 6 a.m. every day for as long as I can remember, to come and see him every day when he would go celebrate that mass at the church, on the back door. And it was not just Catholics doing it. One time he and I talked about, well, what if the Protestants didn't start their own church? And then we went back to the whole idea that that the Reformation wasn't trying to start a new church. The Reformation was trying to reform Jesus's church.
Yeah.
So like, why are we arguing over all these little dalliances that don't really matter, because the Jesus movement isn't going to stop? I don't know.
Yeah. I've had many highs and many lows in religious life. And I will say the highs have so often come in the form of someone reaching out to welcome me when I needed it most and least expected it. And people of many faiths have done that for me.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing. That's a beautiful thing. So like Mark used to do at that 6 a.m. service, and like he used to do, even if we weren't supposed to get communion in the Catholic Church, sometimes he didn't even care.
My husband, the Presbyterian, gave my child's first communion to her. You'd bring the parents up. I just went, this is perfect. Like, never have I felt like more of a woman in the Catholic Church.
Yeah, that's funny. But yeah, welcoming, I mean, that's something that not only Jesus did, but all the disciples did. And most churches have a picture of the Last Supper somewhere in the church. Well, that picture, I think, is wrong, because you don't see who prepared the meal, who was serving the meal, who was at the real table, because it wasn't just one side. Why do you just see one side of the table? Yeah. Who was sitting on the other side with their backs to us? The women. There were probably more women in that room than men. And they were with kids. They were all there. People ate together.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it was a Passover meal. And the child asks the question. The youngest child has a role at Passover.
Also, the feeding of 5,000. That was 5,000 men. They just counted the men. Every man brought somebody. And if it wasn't just one woman, it could have been 2 or 3, and the kids. So I estimate between 12,000 and 15,000 people were fed that day, not just 5,000.
Yeah.
Because, again, who organizes? Who did Jesus really give that fish and loaves to?
There's an Instagram account of women carrying things, and it's just this one intersection, and the amazing loads and humans and toddlers and things that women just cross the street with. And men arrive, handsome, with lovely pockets, deep pockets that hold all the things.
Pockets, that's a whole other theory.
Well, I want to talk about a part of my career and a part of your career that kind of overlapped in the Cleveland area. Is we were both working in the area, in the neighborhood, when Tamir Rice was killed.
Whew.
And I was actually working, I have worked in communities and with people who have been killed by police while unarmed here and in Cincinnati, in kind of an unusual number of cases that have come up. And there's it feels like the entire world should stop for me moment when something like that happens.
Yeah. And it did.
And it did. And I don't know, I feel like Cleveland has not recovered. I think our relationship with community policing has been worse in the past few years. But I remember hearing you talk about Tamir Rice, right. And talk about just kids in the neighborhood. And I wondered just if you have some reflections on that time or this time or just the topic.
So the topic itself, I mean, I think all of our kids are precious, in that 12 to 15 age group. I mean, that's the hormones are kicking in. There's a lot of vulnerability there, and they're playing out, they're acting out what their role is going to be in life,
And they're being targeted.
And now it's even worse, and they are being targeted, and they're being bullied, and they're, it's from all kinds of different.
Yeah, I mean, I specifically meant they're being targeted by gang recruitment to carry out activities.
Yes, but I mean, and I was thinking not only that, but like you're in school, and there's bullying going on, and it's not just the boys. I mean, girls bully too. I mean, there's mean girls. I mean, that's why they made the movie. And there's so much going on, and a 12 to 15-year-old doesn't quite get it. They're cognitively, they're not all there yet, so they're acting things out in a very, very physical way. And Tamir didn't get a chance. He didn't live through his teenage acting out period.
Yeah.
And a lot of young people don't live through their teenage years. As a matter of fact, 21-year-old people who live in the city, they feel lucky. I mean,
to have lived that long.
To have lived that long. Because they don't think they're going to live that long.
I ask people, where did you think you would have been at this point? Sometimes when I'm engaging them, doing suicide intervention work, and it's heartbreaking to me the number of 20-year-olds who will say, well, I never thought I'd live this long, so it's all a bonus. I can do anything I want.
Right.
Like their hopelessness has been in them to that degree for such a length of time.
Yes.
So I always say, when they talk about community policing, the two people they never bring to the table are police or social workers. They never ask those two groups, what do you think should be done? So thinking about that round table where it's me and you and the families and the moms and the 15-year-olds, how do we make our police feel comfortable sitting at that table and being a part of that conversation?
Police is a command structure similar to the Marine Corps. So what the guys in the white shirts say, the guys in the blue shirts do, unless they follow the unwritten rules, which is beat them up on the way in and then book them, right? Or we took this area from the gangs.
Oh, I've heard this. Yes.
We're not going to lose it now. So make an example of the young people, and the gangbangers will still stay away. What better example can you make than one that is tweeted and TikToked all over the world? Tamir Rice shot, cold blood. The car pulls up this far. That car pulled up. Tamir Rice was where the computer is.
Yeah.
Car pulls up, gun out, bam.
If you were a police officer and someone was within 27 feet of you with a blade, you are supposed to shoot them. 27 feet. And if you look at...
That's 4 feet.
Yeah.
So there's always these reasonable. People want to be reasonable. They want to solve this problem, right? Well, the problem is much bigger than like the police and the civilians.
But the police are the people who are there, and they are not wrong that the gangs have taken this neighborhood, and they have a vested interest in people feeling safe waiting at the bus stop.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. Not only that, they put their lives on the line, so it's like their whole lives are involved.
Yeah.
So just a few hundred yards away are 2 memorials to dead police officers.
Yeah.
So that is sacred ground for the Cleveland Police Department. So you get over to the gazebo where Tamir Rice was shot. I mean, like, you're in the cemetery, you're in the same spot. Like, this is sacred ground here.
Yeah.
What do you know, there's no gang banging here anymore. So now we get to the point, you know, just.
Do you think that
after,
is a real effect in that neighborhood, that there's not gang banging in that
well, there's gang activity there. It's just
because
kidding.
I'm scared. I mean, my husband and I lived off West Boulevard, and that was our route to walk past Cadell and up there. And my head's on a swivel in that area.
Well, our head should be on swivels wherever we are.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in an urban setting, especially. But I mean, there's crazy stuff happening everywhere now. I mean, we can't be walking around with our head in a book.
Mm-hmm.
Or our head in the phone.
Mm-hmm.
We just can't. That's the unfortunate thing these days. But the point is, you were asking, is that neighborhood safer now? No. Because there's still going to be stupid stuff happening, because random stuff happens.
Yeah.
Just a lot less. I mean, if you saw the report from the city recently, you know, violent crimes are down. Why is that? Because the population is declining.
Oh, yeah.
And there have been concerted efforts by many different law enforcement entities, all together working to get guns and criminals off the streets, which is the way it should have been all along. But certain entities have their own little ego and their own little way of doing things, and it's different than the other one. And how can we ever work together?
Yeah.
Well, you got to get the person that's in charge of both of them to say, you two got to work together. I don't care how you do it, but just get this done.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, 7 different law enforcement agencies all came together in these, you know, last 3 or 4 years to do it. And that's how it should have been done anyway.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not the biggest gang wins, and the well-funded gang has more firepower.
Right.
So that's the police.
That's the
so
police. Thank you.
So they win in
Yes.
Cudell. Well, that's not the way to solve crime.
Right.
Solving crime is people don't choose criminality,
Yeah.
and they choose another way of life where they actually feel like they are going to live past 20.
Yeah.
If a kid thinks that they're going to live past 20, they're going to say, yeah, I might listen in high school. I might go to this trade program and learn something for 6 months and then get out with a job, which are free programs, by the way.
Yeah.
But if you don't think you're going to live past 21, why bother? It's so much easier to go work for 2 hours moving drugs, because all you got to do is steal a Kia.
Because you know what you can do is hang out with your friends.
Yeah.
And you are a part of a community, and you do have a sense of belonging, and you have a role, and you have purpose, and you have people looking out around you. Unlike when you're attending a how to get a job school class, that at the end we're going to give you a $20 Family Dollar gift card.
There you go. They're making choices that work for them.
They're making choices that work for them.
So if we were really listening, we'd figure out how to walk with them on their journey. You know,
I think I love talking to people about the fruits, you know, and I get to do this as a therapist when people say, you know, what am I doing wrong? And I say, well, if we're looking at this tree, I see what your intentions are with the roots here, right? And your process is bearing this kind of fruit. How's that working? Because it's feeding you, right? You're not starving.
Right.
Is that going to sustain you? And what are we going to do? You're not going to burn down the tree, you know, so what else can we plant? Where else can we grow things? And I would love to have these conversations, and I will be having with our, we have Cleveland Police has a community outreach person who has talked with me for this class before.
Good. So this new entity or iteration of the police department, it's bringing in people who are more thoughtful.
Yeah.
You're working with people now who are not just interested in arrests. See, it used to be the police, they just, there's a quota. You got to have this many arrests. Oh, there's a bad guy? Well, let's go arrest him. So now we're getting into a place where instead of going out there and bringing these people out of the water, you go and figure out why they're in the water to begin with. What is the factors what are the factors that are getting them put in the water? And then what makes that operation fail so that person gets thrown in the water? So then all of a sudden you got the police looking at that, and all of a sudden you realize, wow, you just stopped like 7 kids from getting thrown in the water because you played basketball with them for once a week for a year.
When I worked with the courts, it was really amazing to me because I'm such an anti-establishment kind of person in the careers that I've had. And this was working for the Bureau of Justice Associates, like BJA, federal funding. I went to DC for my training. It was under the federal Supreme Court, Ohio Supreme Court, Court of Common Pleas, like very directional. And I was amazed at that it was still the same as everywhere else, of that bell-shaped curve, that 15% of people that you are going to meet are the kindest, most dedicated, servant-hearted people of all time. Say, I have 14 days until I'm retiring, or I have 14 years till I'm retiring. You can't make me work harder. And then most people are just trying to pay the rent.
Yeah.
Right. And like, I have this I'm supposed to do, and I'm just trying to not get fired from my job. And you have to learn how to plan programming around that. And I had an amazing opportunity because it was a 3-year grant, and 3 times I got to go to a federal, I was funded under, it was something that spelled out the word ISIS. So they changed the letters, right? Okay. But it was like innovations in community supervision. And they were very interested in reducing violence, and suicide is violence against yourself.
Oh, yeah,
so sure. They had written this grant and it went nowhere, and they wrote it again and it went nowhere. And there was this new thing that came out, and they just kind of changed it and it got funded, and I got there, right? So they broke you down into small breakout groups of people who were starting, people who had launched, or people who were evaluating. And then we would all kind of mix. And the national programs that do the most good are so often, and we're talking like Detroit, Chicago, Portland, LA, Cleveland, they're green light programs where one of them in Detroit, they would send out a call just like a 911 call, and it's a community engagement call. And police officers have, based on triage, an order of calls they're supposed to respond to. Right. And these had to be blocked out where they go do paperwork on a bench. You have to park your car and get outside of your car.
Get out of the car.
And the number of homicides in the area that dropped, that they could see, you don't even have to bring potato chips. You don't have to do a TikTok dance. You just have to be there and be seen as doing something other than this, going down the street. And it changes the whole concept of how available you are. And for police safety, you have to move these zones. Yeah. Because police, they get set up.
Sure. Oh, sure. Absolutely.
And we've had police officers die in the line of duty in execution style manners in the last 5 years.
Yes, that's true. That is true. Yeah, so there has to be a real strategy to it, for sure.
We have to address every
city is different.
Yeah.
Every city's different. Cleveland's different than LA, and I mean, think about the sprawl of LA and how do you really work with the police to govern that? I mean, but yeah, I think the police should be invited to every single table. One of the programs that I really enjoyed working with, it was about a 6-year-long program, and that we ran out of grant money. It's called ROCK, Respecting Our Community and Kids. And it was community leaders who got together and as a group walked into schools, and the principals just said, okay, we're going to block out 15 minutes. And so like sometimes it was 50 adults all walking into classrooms. She said, hi, I work and live near you. And I go to work every day, so I don't get a chance to come in here. But just so you know, this is what I do. And they tell their story. And some of them tell the story about sitting in the same classroom as those kids are sitting in.
Yeah.
And like, wow, how did you get to be the director of, CMSD? How did you get to be the chief of police? How did you get? And all of a sudden the kids go, wow, so you grew up here?
Yeah.
And they're like,
I'm putting it out there. I'm trying to get Senator Tom Patton.
yeah.
West Tech warrior.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when kids hear that somebody came from a similar situation and then they're living past 25 or
Yes.
30 or they're older than their parents, wow. All of a sudden they realize, they start putting it together. I said, there is life after this for me. There's life after the gangbang, and I can do something different with my life. I don't have to follow a certain trajectory just because it's about money.
Yeah.
Or just or ego or drugs or learning how to steal cars or blah blah blah. But that's the worst case scenario. It's really the isolation that I think that we're dealing with now.
Well, and so that's a great transition, because I think you and I tend towards like 25 and under, instilling hope, engendering wisdom and connection and meaning and all these things.
Right.
What about our over 50 population and the isolation?
Yeah. I think since COVID, I think everybody forgot what they learned in kindergarten.
Yeah.
And so everybody they assume that we forgot a lot, and we don't care to use them the way we used to want to use them. And you see it when you're in line at Save-A-Lot. Like, I'll go to Save-A-Lot in my neighborhood all the time. And sometimes it's very pleasant. Sometimes people are grumbling. And who do they end up unloading on? The cashier.
Yeah.
And it's over something, cents, or their card doesn't work right, or blah, blah, blah. And they put their card in wrong, or don't swipe it the right way, or whatever. And all of a sudden it becomes a real thing.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, you're on edge just walking in the store because you had a bad experience 2 months ago, and it's your grocery store and you don't even want to go in there.
Yeah, I've had a really hard time on the phone. In the last year, I've made a conscious effort before I call for customer assistance or whatever kind of dispute. One of my cousins works on a telephone line who's in her 50s. And so I just imagine her sitting on the other end of the line, working from home, taking care of her father-in-law. She's got all these things going on. And I think, how can I make this the most pleasant call this person has received all day, even though I have a complaint? And it has helped me. I barely cry on the phone anymore on helplines,
So then, how does that make you feel when you come in prepared for that and then it succeeds?
I feel like an adult. I feel like so successful, like, oh, I got it done.
Right.
We were fine. And I can hear sighs of relief from the other person. And so it makes me a little bit sad, because I wonder what they came from and what they're going into.
Yeah. And their next call could be yucky.
Yeah, but it's a lot of personal humility, and that's the ethics of like, what do I do behind closed doors that no one's ever going to know and no one's ever going to see? And that is 100% how you treat service employees.
Yep. So it comes down to self-actualization, actually.
Yeah.
Because if you just want everybody to win and you walk into that situation and say, okay, I'm going to win, they're going to win, and if I don't get what I want, I'm going to get what I need.
Yeah.
So if that person can't help me, it's not their fault. Okay, so this isn't going anywhere. What can you do to help me get to my next level?
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they're going, oh, well, I have this Rolodex right here. What is it that you need? And all of a sudden the conversation shifts to where they're really doing their job, which is helping, is what they get into that job anyway. They wanted to do. They wanted to help people.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you're letting them help you.
And pivoting mid-conversation when I'm frustrated, I have to say, I feel like I'm trying to achieve something that's not going to happen right now. And I have to name it and say, like, I was hoping you were going to help me solve this thing. It seems like you don't have the solution I need.
Right.
Is there a more helpful direction you can point me in?
Right.
And people love to tell me that.
Yes.
They're like, yeah, I was just waiting for you to quit freaking out. So I'm like trying to get a word in edgewise.
Because I wonder how many people actually have the wherewithal to freaking out
Yeah.
and say, okay, what do I do now? Ask the question, what do I do next now, ma'am? I'm not trying to make this any more difficult than it already is. What do I do next? I did this on the phone yesterday. I was on the phone with my insurance person, and they were telling me I got to stop going to the hospital for this particular CT scan because it costs too much, and you got to go over here. I said, but I don't want to go over there. You can't help me. No. And this is the list of places that you need to call. I said, what? All of a sudden, we're turning this from a 5-minute conversation into me spending the next hour making phone calls. Can you help me with this, please? She says, sure. Let me pull them up on my computer and I'll tell you who's closest to you and who has the fastest available time. I said, thank you, ma'am. And she pulled it up on her computer and said, okay, January 18th, there's an appointment for you right here, right nearby on Metro Campus. Can you make that? And I look at my calendar and said, I sure can. Thank you very much, ma'am. For $700 less.
Hey, I love that.
The insurance company wins and I win.
Yeah.
Because that's less out of my pocket.
So thinking about, maybe to close it up, if you were my student and you are in your Sheffield Lake community,
Yes.
and you're forming a strategy,
Right.
what is your next strategy and how do you incorporate these diversity, justice, representation, equity, loneliness, isolation? How do you incorporate these concepts into your next strategy?
So the first thing is that I have to find some folks that have the time, energy, and wherewithal that want to move forward. Because like I said, I can't move forward unless I have 2 or 3 with me. So I got to find some folks that are willing to do some work with me.
So you're evaluating your project for viability. One of the viability parameters for you is, do I have more people with me who are ready?
And that's, I'm looking in the pews and who's here on Sunday mornings. And I'm also looking about, people that could possibly work with us. They may not be a part of the church.
You're looking for apostles. And you're going among the fishermen.
So it could be people that came to the last community meal that don't worship with us, but they worship at the Lutheran church or the Catholic church or some other church around, or they just walked in because they saw the sign that said community meal. They were wondering what it was. And you wonder what they have heard about community meals or whether they were just hungry.
Yeah.
So there's 2 different strategies with that. Because if they have heard about it and they're curious about the whole thing, then that means that they're probably got a little fertile ground to work with. If they're just hungry, then the immediate need has already been met.
So you have a red carpet strategy with community meals. Can you talk about that?
So I rubbed up against the leadership of the church because they didn't necessarily want to open it to everybody just walking in off the street.
Oh yeah.
Because there's a little fear in that. What if we get some homeless guys, or
what if a sinner comes?
Yeah, or drug addicts or worse. Okay,
I feel like I'm about to sneeze. Go on.
Okay, so you have to build a trusting group of leaders who everybody feels like can shepherd this successfully. So when everybody trusts the shepherding process, then they're more likely to say yes. If they're not trusting the shepherding process, just having one shepherd is not going to do it.
Yeah.
Because then they'll want some type of protection.
Yeah.
And then that means like an off-duty police officer or whatever.
Oh yeah.
So really then, if you have enough of the shepherding process people, then the community meal is a piece of cake. Like what happened in November. We had a community meal and everybody was very nervous about it. But all the volunteers that I had brought myself were the type of people that I know would be able to manage any type of situation that was going to happen. And so there are 45 people that showed up, just have a marvelous time. And the next community meal we have, they're going to show up again. And we've planted some seeds, and now we get to see what those seeds have been doing for the last 4 months.
So you started without needing it to be a monthly commitment, RSVP. You said, we're just going to have this, and that's going to be enough. And we just want everyone who wants to come and eat.
And this is starting from scratch. This is not even a religious thing.
Yeah.
This is a community thing, and everybody's invited. Bring your homeless brother.
Yeah.
You know, bring, you know, your neighbor who probably doesn't eat well because their check runs out, you know, 3/4 through the month. You know, however we do this, but see, it's going to take a long time.
Yeah.
And some churches don't have a long time because they have a finite amount of money, and so the trustees are balancing it out to see, can we survive the process of community building? We need people now to start putting money in the offering plate just to keep the lights on. So it's like this really catch-22 thing. Sometimes people don't feel like they can take the time that's required to really build community the right way.
Yeah.
But see, that brings me back to my philosophy, which is, if God wants you to build it, God is going to give you the resources that's going to make it happen.
Yeah.
So I trust that.
The ark was built by amateurs, right?
And look what happened.
Titanic was built by shipbuilders.
And unfortunately,
That happened too.
that happened too. And they built it way too big and way too inadequately for the number of people and the seas and the horsepower and the iceberg.
The iceberg.
Because you never know what's going to happen. The worst, you gotta plan for the worst. And
Plan for the worst, expect the best.
there you go.
All right, we'll end there. Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
really love that I was off camera almost all the time on my Instagram.
Oh, I didn't even notice.
I loved it. I did it on purpose.
Okay.
It's the pain of being perceived.
So did we do
you
all
know?
right?
We did fabulous, I think.
I kind of got off on a little tangent.
That's where the magic is.
Okay.